I'm Bisa Luzi, and welcome to K2.0's podcast, Other Talking Points. In this episode, we will be talking about popular culture. Songs, movies, reality shows, video games, news. These products of popular culture shape our society. From the way we interact with others, how we view our own identities, how we dress, it's all influenced by popular culture and mass media. Over the last few months, much of Kosovo became captivated with Big Brother VIP Kosova, the first local edition of the international reality show series. The show, which featured contestants from across the dominant spheres of pop culture in Kosovo, reached unprecedented levels of popularity. It was due to this widespread popularity that some were particularly concerned about the misogyny and homophobia that was a prominent aspect of the show and the characters' conversations. How was this questionable celebrity culture shaping its viewers? Other forms of popular culture have also come under scrutiny. For example, mainstream music in our region often perpetuates sexist, nationalist, or homophobic ideas. The daily news cycle, particularly entertainment news, often centers on personalities and spectacle. Internet culture is driven by constant comparisons to unhealthy and unrealistic lifestyles, which exacerbates teenagers' body image and mental health issues. These pop culture elements in our lives play a role in establishing common norms and social expectations, but many voices of groups are neglected or even oppressed in the dominant narratives. That is why pop culture's significance is not just tied up in concerns about quality or that it's material produced for the lowest common denominator. Pop culture is shaped by and shapes the ideological, political, and economic values of the world around us. Academics have long discussed this aspect of pop culture. Is it merely the vulgar transformation of culture into a commodity? Or does pop culture have the potential to be a site of resistance? One where values and norms can be challenged and reimagined. To discuss such questions and specific cases from the region, I have Lindita Tahiri and Jovana Gligorjevic here with me today. Lindita Tahiri teaches at the Department of English Language and at the Department of Journalism at the University of Pristina. Her courses cover literary criticism, mass communication, language and culture, language and ideology. She has publications, including 3 books in the field of literary criticism and critical discourse analysis, as well as 2 university textbooks in mass communication and media literacy. Jovana Gligorjevic is a journalist at the Belgrade-based magazine Vreme and co-founder of the group Female Journalists Against Gender-Based Violence. She co-authored guidelines for ethical reporting on gender-based violence and is the author of media literacy manuals for high school teachers. Lindita, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Jovana, it's great to have you here as well.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
Great, thanks. Thank you both. And I would like to begin the discussion by inviting both of you just to offer your views on what are some of the most dominant forms of popular culture today in our context. And what do you think, what kind of particular value systems they end up shaping or contributing toward?
Well, I would say that popular culture covers a lot of creations and productions. I intentionally use both the term creation and production so that it doesn't sound too utilitarian. It is possible today to interact with the popular culture. Your last comments on whether popular culture is a commodity that we consume without thinking about it and without thinking about how it influences our lives. But on the other hand, it has the potential of resistance. So between these two extremes, I think there are there's the possibility of ways to discuss popular culture. So an example of popular culture is Bob Dylan, who won the Nobel Prize, but also the Big Brother that you just mentioned. So I think that the term is very complex, sometimes contradictory. I prefer to use it as a descriptive term, not as a judgmental term, not as an evaluative term. I always have a problem of definitions which includes this moral element and see the popular culture as the other compared to the high culture. So definitely this is not something that I would like to do. So it's rather the quantitative indicator. So is it a favorite? Is it as the word says, popular? And also, I think that it's a much better choice than the word massive, for instance, which is a bit more derogatory.
Thank you, Lindita. And Jovana, how do you see popular culture in our region, some of the dominant forms that we encounter?
Well, first of all, I would like to agree with Lindita about not using pop culture or any other term on this topic and definitions as derogatory, because they are simply not. And I also prefer using it as a neutral term that just marks some phenomena that we have in all of our societies. And when it comes to Serbian society and popular culture, I'm a little bit divided myself, because I think that sometimes it does perpetuate certain behaviors or attitudes. But on the other hand, it can be an echo of things that are already happening either in society, personal relationships, depends what we are talking about. But you have mentioned Big Brother VIP, that is obviously a topic in Kosovo. This one area in popular culture that Serbia really has an issue are reality programs. With sexism, not so much homophobia, but the issue is much bigger than just sexism, because we really have a lot of violence in our reality programs, and of course violence against women, but that's not the only form of violence. And sometimes I think that Serbian media market and Serbian reality show audience is different from the rest of the world, because while in the rest of the world, when it comes to realities, sex is what sells, here actually fights and violence is what makes them, what gives TV houses bigger reach and shares. So that's a really big issue.
And I would actually, Lindita, want to tap here with you on just the name of these shows. They're called reality shows, but to what extent can we actually say that they are based on reality? Because we know that there is that performative aspect to everything that happens within these programs. Contestants are selected, they live in a house together, they're aware that they're being watched by the larger public. Maybe at some point they even start to forget that aspect of being watched, but they are also constructing a reality within that space where they're living together, and it reflects maybe the larger society they're coming from. So can you maybe just elaborate on this, the term itself, reality, in terms of how we think of these shows?
Yes, the term reality definitely is not the right label for the show. There is more reality in a science fiction movie than in a reality show. And my students often do this exercise. They find more reality indicators in science fiction, in the term that there is the probability of finding real life events like people having jobs or people being spontaneous with each other. Whereas, on the other hand, in the Big Brother, in the other reality productions, there's a lot of performance and editing. This distinction between what is reality and fiction, I think, has been quite an important public discussion, and therefore we use the term narrative so often for everything. What is the dominant narrative? When I was a young girl, the term narrative was used exclusively for fiction, for literature, and now it's used for journalism, for reality show. And I think people are becoming aware about this in this postmodern era, that everything is under construction. But as Ivana said, I fully agree with her. This kind of reality shows, they are reality in the sense of echoing the values that are embodied in our cultures, like get rich quickly, grab everything for yourself. A man should always be stronger and richer than a woman, or whatever. Therefore, the sense of reality is this probability of finding similar values as dominant narrative of these reality shows. But as you know, Big Brother was coined by a famous writer, Orwell, who was afraid that the Big Brother is watching us. But another famous writer, Huxley, he was afraid that we are choosing to be watched by Big Brother, and we choose to watch Big Brother. So this is entertainment as an addiction is something that is important and is discussed nowadays, also in popular culture.
Yes, exactly. And Jovana, to continue maybe a bit more this aspect of the conversation, and you talked, you mentioned earlier how in the reality shows in Serbia they became spaces where there was a lot of also violence perpetuated. And Lindita also just talked about the fact that maybe the only aspect that is reality to these shows is the extent to which they also represent the larger the values that we embrace in society. So I'm just curious to know what were some of the reactions in Serbia, if you can explain the violence that happened, maybe briefly, because I see that it's potentially, of course, it's a complex issue to get into, but just was there any reaction to it? Did it potentially serve as a place where violence could be talked about then differently within the larger public?
First of all, since Lenita mentioned it, there's more reality in science fiction than in reality. I will also agree, but I would like to recommend something to the listeners. There is this TV show based on the book, and the author of the book is a woman who used to be a producer of a reality TV show, one reality TV show, and I think it is still available on different you can find it in many different ways. The name of the show is Unreal, and it shows how actually a reality TV show behind the scenes, and what the only real thing I believe that there is manipulation with participants, because you can see how of course many of the things are staged, but not staged in the classical way, but yes, they will tell the participant that her mother has just died, which is real, but they will not do that the moment they get the information. But first, they will arrange a party and make her drink a lot, and so that another contestant could, try to comfort her, and then they would kiss. Something like that. So there is a lot of manipulation. And when you watch reality programs here in Serbia with critical distance, of course, you can spot where the manipulation shows. But when we speak about violence reactions and public discussions, unfortunately, the only thing that I notice is that the violence has been normalized among the widest possible audience, so within all target groups. I can't remember an example that we actually problematized except within our circles, disputes and violence against women, or violence in general. In realities, the biggest issue, if you ask me, is the fact that the most viewed realities are broadcasted on two TV stations, and they both have both national frequency and, of course, national coverage. And our regulatory body, which by the law should react and punish them in some way, never ever did it. The most brutal violence we had seen is when one contestant has beaten a woman with a crotch. His leg was broken, and he was mad at her, so he really severely beat her with the crotch that helped him walk. That was one example. Another one was when a contestant used the microphone. They were having some singing contest karaoke or something like that. So she used microphone to break teeth of another contestant. Nothing ever happened, but we had even bigger scandals when one of the contestants was arrested in the reality. It was also some VIP version. Actually, his wife was a singer, and she was murdered, and that murder was a really big mystery for our police for years. Meanwhile, he became a celebrity as a widower, and he was arrested for her murder in the reality, which is, I can see your face, quite unbelievable. And I know, yes, it is, but it did happen. That's one thing that happened. And then other contestants were actually encouraged to comment on what happened. Later on, he was sentenced, by the way, only a couple of months ago for her murder. And the other thing where I think that our regulatory body really had to react is when at the prime time, it was around 7 or 8 p.m., they brought a sex worker to the house which is the setting for reality. And I'm not sure that this is family friendly, what I'm going to say, but actually she performed a sex act on all male contestants. And that was broadcasted live with no blur or things like that at 8 p.m. on the Saturday night. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, and nothing happened. There are so many other examples of physical fights, even sexual violence or sexual harassment, mental breakdowns of contestants. Right now, we actually have a baby that is growing up in reality, in one of the realities, because the mother of the baby got pregnant in one of the realities. Then she entered just a little bit after the baby was born. She entered another reality with her mother, and they are now continuously from season to season in this same reality, which is inspired by Big Brother concept, but is a little bit different because in Serbia currently nobody has the license for broadcasting Big Brother. And also she spoke about her mental issues, which are quite serious. And I think it's good that people can at least hear something. The audience that is not usually interested in understanding mental issues, that they can see a person with mental issues and maybe have some compassion towards her. But on the other hand, there is more space for manipulation when you have a mentally unstable person and you're actually exploiting her issues for the viewership. I hope I didn't give you too much to to think about, but that's just in short. I mean, with all the incidents, we could speak for days about Serbian reality.
No, I think it definitely gives us something to think about. And Lindita, maybe to talk a bit about those who are in charge of producing and disseminating popular culture, because in academia and in different schools of thoughts, for example, with regard to, for example, critical theory, the Frankfurt School was very critical of popular culture, but they placed a lot of course, their emphasis was on the interest that they saw popular culture as something deriving from the power elites, from those that hold political and economic capital, and that they basically will lead to a society that just can absorb and takes whatever it is served. And this later on was, of course, expanded in postmodernism, that also talks about how people are trained to constantly consume information. So could you maybe expand a bit on this? Because I think it'd be interesting to also talk about the interest behind popular culture. And I don't want to treat it now necessarily popular culture as something negative, but if you look at some of the examples that Jovana was talking about, the kind of violence that it produced and the fact that it didn't necessarily lead to a change in conversation in society, I think we also have to look behind the political and economic interests of those producing and in charge of these kind of formats of popular culture.
Yes, Jovana's examples were shocking for me and very harsh. But this is an industry, entertainment industry. Like every other industry, they want to profit. So I don't think that we can change this logic. When they find fertile ground, then of course they make a profit. I think that we could discuss a lot about the ideology behind it. It's commercial, it's cultural, it wants to reach, as you said, the lowest common denominator. However, I think that we should try to work with the other side, with the audience, with the readership, with the public. And both of us, Jovana and me, are interested in media literacy. So I think that it's very difficult to change the logic of the industry. And also I will try to articulate a more positive or optimistic belief. It comes with age. So compared to you, my age gives me this commodity to be more optimistic. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to see the future as darker. I really I'm very optimistic that the global contents are which are accessible equally for all of us in our regions, allow for maybe hybridization and for opening up to alternative ideas. And I really believe that these kind of values that are obvious from Jovana's examples, they are like violence and sexism, that there is this active consumer but active, who can select, who can resist. Of course, we may be manipulated as well, it's human, but at other times we assign alternative values and meanings and interpretations to contents. So I think that this battle would be lost if we focus on the industry. The industry wants profit, and for us, as I'm a teacher, and I really believe that education has to incorporate this second school or informal school of young people, because young people get the ideas and narratives of how should their lives be lived, what should their identities be like, and I really think that there are so many options around. Like reality shows and social media have been very smartly criticized in a BBC production called Black Mirror. And I think young people here have access equally to Black Mirror as to Big Brother. So I'm marveled by this possibility to raise the awareness through popular culture productions which criticize popular culture. It's like a meta discussion, and I am really optimistic about this.
Yeah, we can move into definitely to potential sites of resistance. Maybe, as I said at the beginning, so as places where different mass culture can emerge, and to just questioning whether it be rules of society or challenging power or identity structures in place, and of course. For example, across Europe and the US, I think, especially, for example, in the past 2 decades, we've seen a lot of progress with regard to representation in the media, whether be it with LGBT minorities or other ethnic minorities, and even Big Brother, to be fair, Big Brother VIP in Kosovo, it had this novelty in it because it had one of the contestants was a drag queen. And I think that did lead to a lot of small conversations. It was possible to really break the patriarchy and the misogyny within a lot of the conversations that happened there. But still, there was a positive in a lot of ways. And I know, Jovana, that also in Serbia, one such space, maybe that if we can call them these sites of resistance, was the contest for the Eurovision song that happened in Serbia, because it brought spotlight to Zena, a Roman singer who is also vocal about the rights of Roma people, and then also Gypsy, a gay Roma singer which was, both of these were considered very important steps for recognizing Roma and also gay rights. And there's a very interesting intersectionality there. So
Yes.
do you see this as a site of resistance? And can you talk a bit about what it produced in Serbia?
Of course they do, especially when it comes to Gypsy, because as you said, he is both a representative of LGBT community and the Roma community. So he's minority in every sense of the word. But on the other hand, he when he first showed up on the pop music scene, he was such a refreshment that he became instantly very popular and recognized and really loved because of his music. Of course, I'm not undermining Zena's success, but the fact is that Gypsy showed up a little bit earlier on the scene. And he was already very popular, and especially young people knew about him, unlike Zena, which became really popular in Serbia after the Eurovision contest. Yes, actually, some really good things are happening. And I would like to point out some other good examples. For example, I will just a little bit talk about realities. The first time that you could see a gay couple on national TV was in reality. Actually, two girls started a relationship in reality on TV with national coverage. So there are places of resistance. You can find them in music industry. You can find them in maybe we will tackle later on alternative social media, however we call them. So there are communities in terms of popular culture. But also, I don't think this is the new thing. And there's also in Serbia one paradox when we speak about places of resistance, because, for example, the first gay kiss that we could see in a music video was in the video of folk singer Indira Radic. And folk music or turbo folk music is not something that is widely considered as progressive. But when you I don't know, make the checklist at the end result is that turbo folk scene has actually always been more progressive, because on the other hand, we had really popular rock musicians like Bora Đorđević, Ribda Čorba, who perpetuated both nationalism, and he was actually really pro-war with Croatia and Bosnia. He made songs that were practically hate speech from today's point of view against Croats and Albanians. Unlike folk singers who were the first actually after the war to renew the connections and to start touring all over the region. So that's a little bit of paradox. That's something that I've been criticized often in my journalistic work for defending turbo folk turbo folk artists, let's say, for their work in terms of reconciliation, for example. Of course, we can discuss many individuals in particular, but that is the fact. Also, there's another example of Oliver Mandic, singer-songwriter who was really popular as progressive during the 80s, and he used to play a little bit with drag in his videos and music, but later on he became one of the closest friends of Željko Ražnatović Arkan, and he voluntarily went to Bosnia with paramilitary troops. He claims that he was fighting. There are witnesses who say that he was just walking around. It doesn't matter, but he was willing to, he was not forced, but he decided to actually wear uniform and wear weapons and go to Bosnia and take part in the war. So this is, from my point of view, really interesting, because those places of resistance in popular culture we often find where we don't hope that we will find them. So we can find some parallels actually with global or American pop culture. For example, we here in the rest of the world would probably not know as much about the problems of working class in America if there wasn't Bruce Springsteen or Woody Guthrie or many other performers or songwriters who problematized the issue of working class in their songs.
And actually, Western entertainment industry, Lindita, I would like to connect here with you. They've also had a huge effect and a huge impact in the way these cultural industries work everywhere. And Jovana touched a bit on this, of how we've potentially learned about struggles of middle-class Americans through a rock singer, to a singer like Bruce Springsteen. But I think they've also had a larger effect in music and in film, in series, and to what extent is there space for how do you see other kinds of popular culture emerging from very specific, let's say, contexts like in Kosovo? So what elements it takes from the cultural industries in the West, and then how it combines it with the specific cultural context of the society is being produced in?
Well, what is exported is also imported. So you kind of have a chance to create a hybrid. I very much believe in hybrid cultures. And I'll give you an example of a Coca-Cola can or tin, because of the famous slogan, Coca colonization, this kind of belief that this commodities bring also some cultural, even political values, which are somehow injected into passive consumers. I really don't think that it's so simple. First of all, I believe, as I said, in active producers. And also I think that as teachers and parents, we should try to work in our families and at school or in other formal, informal environments and make young people understand that there are no singular meanings or divine values that are eternally in a commodity and then somehow it's injected and they just are transformed by it. So let's go back to the example of the Coca-Cola tin, which I saw in late 80s or beginning of 90s in Albania after the fall of communism. I was invited at a home and quite a poor room, as one would expect from one of the most dictatorial states in the world. And there was a Coca-Cola can as a decoration. Nothing, a fully poor room, and they were proud to have a Coca-Cola can in the table with, kind of embroidery around it. It was such a strong lesson for me, stronger than whole book about communism or about the poverty, humiliation, and dreams. So it was a recontextualization of this coca colonization. So I think that the global values are recontextualized. Sometimes they are reinterpreted from a different perspective. There's always a possibility to interact with them, and I really enjoy forums where productions are sort of reproduced and discussed, and I really think that this is the power of the global culture.
And while you were talking about the can, the Coca-Cola can example, the book cover of Leia Upi's book actually came to mind, Free, and she talks. She talks about that as well, and I also remember in the 90s, because we used to take these cans and we would turn them into pencil holders. So we had like a Coca-Cola, but then later on Sprite, Fanta, and all of that. So maybe this would be actually a good segue, and I would just like to stay a bit more in conversation with you, just also about books and about literature as well, because I think also books are also equally a place of sites of resistance as well when it comes to popular culture and industry, and to talk a bit about maybe also language. And I know that Lindita, that's because you come from literary criticism as well. So to talk a bit about also how language is used in popular culture, there is, of course, one of the ways is always to use these kind of like rigid dichotomies, so war, peace, love, hate, hero, villain. But then there's also other elements that get intertwined in the way language is used in literature specifically. And I was thinking earlier about Harry Potter, because it's been the series and the franchise that it came out of Harry Potter. It started as a book and it went on to replicate it became a movie. There's a lot of merchandise. There's a whole young adult world community that are fans around Harry Potter. So it has had this very profound impact on a global scale of people identifying with the series. So how do you see books like this, like Harry Potter, their language and the world that they create also for children? What does it teach children on what types of values to believe in and how to identify? So if you can maybe just talk a bit about literature specifically in this regard, and maybe we can use Harry Potter as an example.
Yes, it's a good example. There is a famous professor from Yale, Harold Bloom, a literary critic, who condemned all readers of Harry Potter. He was very disappointed about 20 years ago when Stephen King won a National Book Award in United States, and he said that we are training our kids by reading to them Harry Potter, by giving to them Harry Potter, we're training them to read Daniel Steele and Stephen King, and these are books which only make millions of dollars, but they do very little for humanity. So I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing what he said. These are maybe not exactly but his words, but what I really remembered, because I discussed this with my students, is this really very abstract to say that these books do little for humanity? Can you reject the enthusiasm, as you said, of millions of readers and the public? So in some cases, universities still resisting popular culture, but in majority of the cases, in literature classes, both Shakespeare and Madonna songs are interpreted, but this is not necessarily always the case. I prefer to do it in my classes, but this is not so much institutionalized, in particular in this region. So to go back to your question, I think that Harry Potter, for instance, offers the space, and I believe this is what I think that popular culture offers. It offers some space for a public discussion for important issues in society, like what should the school be like? I mean, you can see in Harry Potter some really strict professors who make you teach by heart and who spank you, and they are thrown in the forest. And I really loved it. They are away from the school because they don't know how to teach. And other professors who teach you about life, who connect life with education, they are sort of prioritized, and also diversity. People are born with magic, mix with people who are born without it. So I think that these values are important nowadays. And what Professor Bloom didn't like about Harry Potter, he said cliches, dead metaphors, predictable sentences, and boring paragraphs, and so this is about your question related to language. I really don't think so. I think that for instance, Rowling is smart to use dialogues. She doesn't sort of judge characters. She allows us to judge them because she doesn't talk about them. She lets them talk by themselves. So, to cut short, popular literature is very often written by people who are trained in literary techniques, who are aware that the readership is smarter and smarter, so they use open ending, they use multiple perspectives, and this is exactly what contemporary literature is known about these strategies that give power to the reader. And popular books do this quite often. And I really wouldn't condemn Harry Potter as much as sometimes it's condemned. I know it's not included in academia or at schools, but luckily children can read it.
And I guess maybe, Jovan, I'm going to connect here with you because today it's become a bit difficult maybe to talk about Harry Potter actually when without taking into account just everything, the whole backlash that has happened also with J.K. Rowling herself and with her comments with regard to trans women and with everything, the whole conversations about cancel culture and all of that. So I do think this also shows that we've been using this word resistance, and I would like to use it now like resistance from the public, from the audience. I think that there's maybe there's a lot more voices out there that are more vocal and that want to be part of the conversation. We saw it in the backlash towards J.K. Rowling, and I think it also linked into the fact that I know that later on, after publishing the books, then she said that some characters were actually like gay, but she never had made that very visible in the beginning of the book. So she's faced a lot of different backlash in that regard. So how do you see our interaction also with authors in this sense? Like, to what extent, what the conversation around her actually now ends up affecting the potential of the books to do something else on their own?
Yes, but speaking about this issue is like a minefield in a way. We're speaking about the controversy of J.K. Rowling, but what I am going to say is that what really made me mad about that whole conversation, first of all, I think that at the beginning she was misunderstood. Then the backlash pushed her on the transphobic part of the spectrum, let's say, just like that. But what really made me mad was this one tweet that became really viral, or it was Instagram comment, I don't know. Let's pretend that J.K. Rowling never wrote Harry Potter. So we will keep Harry Potter, but we will deny authorship and ownership to J.K. Rowling. And why I was mad? Because she's a woman, she's a female writer, and there is not so many women in literature who are recognized as great writers and or popular writers while they are still young and alive. It doesn't happen a lot with women. So here in Serbia, we also had this discussion and this I know that there is this possibility always to separate the author from their work. But completely ignoring, completely taking away any ownership of Harry Potter to J.K. Rowling is something that is really, really, really unfair to the author, and to ignore her completely. We know that when HBO did this reunion on the 20th anniversary, she was not included there. I mean, it's a really long discussion, and there's always this question: is there and what is the difference between transphobia and gender critical feminism? And I'm ready to hear both sides, but from my point of view, any dialogue at this point is not possible because everything is so heated at the moment. But when it comes to young adult literature, I would like to point out, I recently read a paper from the author is a psychologist, and it was a scientific paper which was practically a comparison of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and Twilight Saga. And it shows how things can become retrograde, even like in 2 centuries. There's exactly 200 years between these two books. And while what the author claims actually is that Pride and Prejudice sets more healthy values and healthier views on a relationship than the Twilight Saga does, because you have this Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, and first at the beginning they dislike each other, but then they have this whole year in which they both have their personal evolution. They grow as people, as persons. They grow up and they change their values and opinions, and then they of course fall in love with both things. Both books are romance genre, of course. And on the other side, 200 years later, you have Twilight Saga, and I will quote the author, who says the things that Edward does to Bella, these are the names of the main characters, this is straight up for the restraining order. There's so much abuse, there's so much neglecting of her needs, attitudes, and things like that. And that's something that I wanted to point out when it comes to young adult literature and the values that it perpetuates. And we can see it actually in the real world, because I have a friend who is also psychologist, and she is doing these workshops with young girls about the importance of consent when it comes to relationships. And what she sees on the field is that the jealousy is highly valued in relationships among young people, which we can all agree is not really healthy. It's not healthy at all. Actually, but both her and her colleagues think that these well, it was book series actually, and it was not the only one, but everything started with Twilight Saga actually was something that put a seed to these attitudes and highly valued jealousy amongst young people.
I think this allows us also a good way to start. I want to go slowly into the last question and to talk about, because it's about the kind of values that media texts in general produce. And then also it's about the ability of the audience to critically assess them and to be able to have a critical approach to how we understand images and text, which takes us into media literacy. We touched very briefly, it was mentioned. And I would like to ask both of you just about, do you see it important? And Lindita, you talked a bit about this, that you included within your class. You use popular culture also as media text with students to have them analyze the messages, the constructions, the values that it communicates. So maybe just to talk about the role that media literacy can play in also how we engage with popular culture in general, and to what extent whether you do this and how you do it, and just why is it important according to you?
For me, it's important not only for popular culture, but in general for the survival of the individual in this time when we're surrounded with so many messages. And sometimes because of the term media literacy, the parents and schools think it's only about media in the narrow sense of the word. I think that it is a very important skill. Without it, I mean, the term literacy, on the other hand, is very clarifying, because if young people do not have this skill, they become illiterate. So it's either literacy or illiteracy. I don't want to judge in binary oppositions, but I'm just trying to explain the importance of the term. And for instance, at school, it would be important for teachers of history, and also out of school, it would be important for young people who read various narratives of history. And Jovana mentioned herself alternative narratives of the war in her country. So it's important for young people to understand when some messages are ideological, political, manipulative, propaganda, brainwashing, when there are slogans, and how should they critically approach them. And it's easier to say that we need this skill in history or philosophy or in religious studies. But on the other hand, we need it in literature. I incorporate it in all my classes and in journalism studies. But it's needed also in science. The way how we discuss, for instance, the future of the globe, ecological issues, which are so pertinent right now. So global warming, of course, the way how science informs us about it. Why is it or isn't it successful? And art also, because art also always has incorporated some ideological values. So basically, I think this is a very important skill to help us appreciate the messages that surround us in every sphere, and as you said, to have a critical approach, also to be able to recreate, because now with the new media we can all be producers. So definitely this should be an important not subject, I would rather say intra-curricular dimension, not only one subject, but an awareness of in all the curricula at any level of schools.
Jovana, maybe a bit about your work with media literacy in this regard.
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that Lindita said, but we do have media literacy in our elementary and high school curriculums for I think it's 2 or 3, just before the pandemic, it entered the regular curriculum. But it's really, really bad because it starts and it tackles only fake news. So what we do at the moment, when I say we, I think many media trainers and media organizations, we do these trainings for school teachers where we speak about media information literacy, actually, because that's how it is defined by UNESCO. And we try to train them how to teach school children that first of all, what is media message, that it can be everywhere, that also the book, the movie, something that's written on the t-shirt can be a media message, and that each media message is a construct that should be dissected into the elements, deconstructed and then reconstructed again, and that then they should try to construct their own media message. But that's not what's happening in our schools at the moment, unfortunately. And it's really eye-opening for teachers who attend our trainings when we tell them that there are so many movies that they can watch together with their students that could be really in both informative, eye-opening, and actually encourage the discussion on certain topics. Yes, in Serbian schools, children do watch movies for educational purposes, but that's not education. That's propaganda, and that's really bad. And that's something that I have experienced as a both elementary and high school student, because we were taken to the cinema, for example, when I was only 6, when I had to watch this quite terrible movie, Battle for Kosovo, and children were literally throwing up because there are so many heads being cut or whatever. Many people beheaded in that movie, and it was really traumatizing. What I know that is happening right now is when it comes to this historical issue with concentration camps in Croatia during World War II. Teachers are history teachers are showing this quite terrible. It's terrible even in the sense of as a movie, not only from the ideological point of view. Dara from Jasenovac, and for me it's horrible because it's really, I will say, it's snuff. It's really snuff movie. It can be traumatizing for children, but it's not the biggest problem with the movie. The biggest problem is that it's been shown by history teachers, and it's historically inaccurate in every meaning. Even when you hear some traditional Serbian music, like certain kolo, which is Serbian national dance, and there's this composition that they force people to play, so imprison people to play. It was composed in 60s, so there's no way that in 1941, during the World War II, anyone would even know about it, because it didn't exist. And it's really, really popular. And when you say kolo, nowadays you really think about that composition. And there are so many other historical inaccuracies. So it's yes, the teachers, to make myself shorter, yes, the teachers use certain pieces of popular culture, but they do it in a terrible way in terms of propaganda and indoctrination. And I would say, when I compare what's going on nowadays and when and my personal experience with that period of my life, I think it's a really long tradition of indoctrination among school children when it comes, especially to these big national topics from national history.
Yeah, and just made me think actually how important it is to also have additional resources to for these kind of topics to tap into, because while you were explaining what's happening in Serbia, kind of on the opposite side of it, I thought of this very good program that DocuFest, the International Documentary Short Film Festival in Prizren in Kosovo, have, because they've built this resource online of movies that are accessible to teachers, and they've been also just helping do a lot of conversations with high school teachers and with lecturers. I know that Lindita, you were also part of their program at some point, and they're building this additional platform resource with not propaganda movies, but movies that tap into the daily issues that we're facing. So trying to encourage using film as a tool for education. So just to end a bit more on a positive note, Lindita and Jovana, thank you so much for this truly wonderful and provoking conversation in a lot of sense. For me, it's truly been, I've learned a lot today talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing this discussion. It was also an opportunity for me to learn a lot and to be in a unique composition with the two of you.
Thank you for me also. It was really actually inspiring and I think productive conversation.
Other Talking Points is a K2.0 podcast. You can listen to it regularly on our website, kosovo2.0.com, or by subscribing to Kosovo 2.0 on Spotify.